All right, my friends. My name is Bishop Holsonback. This is my YouTube channel and my Facebook group, and I want to welcome all to the program. Tonight we got Gary. Well, not just tonight. Gary comes to our show monthly, and this month we're going to be talking about Nazi Germany. All right, my friends. So sit back and enjoy. Before we get started, I like to talk a little bit more about Mr. Wayne's book, because a lot of people message me on Messenger asking me, when is Gary Wayne's book coming out? And this is y'all's chance also to interact live with Gary Wayne and ask your own questions to Mr. Wayne. So please do not hesitate to comment in the comment box. You know, my friends, we all have different views. That's just what makes us different. So, please comment in the comment box. All right, Mr. Wayne, please tell us where they can go finally to go get your book at.
Well, so happy to be back with you and your audience, and many apologies for us not getting the show done in December, but between things that come up and on both sides, it was sort of a disappointment not to get it done. But we're back, and we try and be on once a month, like what you say. And so where the book is at today, and I know I have a lot of pre-orders in. I know Amazon and companies have a pre-order in. There's a March 12th release date. That was a pretty safe date that was put out because of the sort of broken sort of publishing industry since COVID, with a shortage of paper, a shortage of printers, a shortage of labor. And it's kind of being more and more dominated by the oligarchical groups with control of the printers. So a lot of the smaller printers have folded up, which is going to be make it more difficult for authors to get published. That's the unfortunate side, and more control over the information. So I talked to my publisher late last week, and wanted to get an update because I want to be able to keep everybody up to speed as to where we're at. And he said, the good news is it's at the printers, which I already knew because it went there late November, but it's actually in the printing process. So they're actually printing it. Now, they don't print the book all at once. They print, especially a book this size. So they print books in sections, and then they put them together. So it's not just one and done. It's like, I don't know how many pages are in a run, so it takes a little bit of while to do it. Unfortunately, I had a run late last year. I didn't do it, but we had to deal with it. It was missing a section because they put it together. So there was a whole bunch of replacement books that went out to replace that. So anyways, where it's at the printers, I'm hoping that it's going to be shipped to me still this month, and I can start shipping either late this month or early February, but we're definitely going to beat the production or the release date that was set out for March 12th. So it's very, very close. As soon as I get books, I'll be shipping myself, even if Amazon isn't ready to open up the ship date, because it controls the publish date, and that sort of overlaps to all the other publishers as well, using the same date, because they control well over 50% of the market. So and so if I get books, I don't care about the release date. I will ship the books that people have ordered with me. So you can bet that I'll be shipping those out as fast as I can. It'll take me time because most of them are individually packaged, custom papers and everything like that. So I'll be doing them in batches every day to get them out. But I'm excited to get onto that project. And I'm also excited that as of this week, the Kindle for the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2 as well. So I was telling people it would be available for digital, and that's how it's going to be available. And you can pre-book a digital copy as well. So now you've got the digital for pre-book and the printed copy. So hoping to have that book out pretty soon. And I've been doing a lot of shows almost every day, and we'll be doing so right through to the end of June, basically how I'm booked right now. I got some openings in May and a few in June. So I'll be talking about this a lot over the next while. And in the meantime, I've started book 3. Actually, I'm redoing book 3. Actually, it was book 2 before I stopped it and started this book. And this book was really interesting because it allowed me, I was struggling. I was like not listening, I guess. And I was like pushing a rock uphill, and it just, I got 300 pages into it, but it was not happy. It didn't like the format. It wasn't coming to me. And so when I stopped and I redid this book, it showed me how I should be doing book 3. And so now it's going rather quickly and smooth. And I think it's going to be a nice addition to the series. And it will be focusing on the Holy Covenant, the prehistory of that, how it's connected to giants and the angelic realm, what happened with the blessings and the curses of the covenant, and then the end time prophecies that go with it. So, and the second Exodus. So that'll be book 3. I don't know when it will be done, and I'll be working hard to promote book 2 for a while. And it's important because I think a book, if it's written well, it should have some staying power. So, like with book 1, the first year was a big push to get a lot of sales or a few sales. I mean, it was not quite what my sort of expectations might have been, but it has increased in sales every year since it's been released. And so it sells more books than it did the year before, year after year. And so it's got what I really am satisfied with about book 1 is it has that staying power. And I know based on how I did book 2, I'm hoping it will have the same kind of staying power as will book 3, and a great reference book as well for people. And so both books are written independently. They do overlap a little bit, but you can read one without the other. But I think if you read one, you're going to want to read the other because it's that kind of fit. So that's where we're at on it. I know that was a bit of a ramble,
No,
but
not at all. How long has book 1 been out? I know I've been interviewing you for close to 5 years.
So the book was actually finished in printing at the end of 2015, and I received books in December of that year. And for my own, and of course it was going out for distribution, and I think I got like all of 300 book sales for that year through the opening orders, right? So, and then so 2016 was really the launch date, but it was 6 months into that when I did a publishing showdown in Florida for Christian book authors, and sort of officially launched it sort of then. And so it's been out since, let's say, 2016. And once I learned how to work social media and people started interviewing me in about May or June of 2016, then it was sort of off to the races.
Yes, you haven't stopped, Mr. Wayne, because you're on so many. You're everywhere. You're out there.
Well, I don't know about everywhere, but I feel humbled and privileged that so many audiences are having their podcasters get a hold of me because they want to hear about some of the things that I've written about and what I plan to write about. So
I just laugh.
It's an honor.
When they compare you to Derek Gilbert or other people out there, I just laugh because you have way much more knowledge than a lot of people that are out there, Mr. Wayne. And I know you're very humble about this, but that's the fact.
Well, I think Derek's a terrific researcher.
No, he's a terrific man. He's a terrific guy.
Yeah. And he goes,
just no disrespect at all.
And he goes deeper into some areas than I do. So I always like working with Derek because our research fits with each other's. Yeah, it's different, but it tends to fit in. And we may have a little bit different approach on some of the eschatological portions, but not significant differences, but just a little bit on the timing on some of the things. So yeah, he's one of those really good researchers that are out there and bringing good ideas. And Douglas Hagman's another one that does really good books and really good research and brings it out there. And you got got L.A. Marzulli, who does different kind of research, but it's still all part of the whole thing. So I have a lot of respect as I got to know some of these individuals over the last 10 years. Not like we're super friends, but, to talk with or email with or meet and talk at conventions and do shows with. So, but I think what is unique is my research is different than everybody else's. It has a whole different look, a whole different feel, a little bit more comprehensive, and in areas that people haven't even sort of thought about looking at.
And you can digest, Gary's book. It's broken down into really small chapters. I know it's a big book, but it is written this way.
Yep. And people will be happy to know that book 2 is only 84 chapters versus 98. a lot smaller. Just kidding. Yeah, and because I know it's tough to read that long, but if you want to tell a lot about the story, I don't want to shortchange people with them. So, but I have a lot of people who say, you know what, the great thing is about what you did in Genesis Conspiracy 1 is that it's an incredible amount of information, but it kept their interest all the way through. Like they didn't want to stop reading it. Like they didn't feel that they had heard enough because they knew there was more coming that was going to be important as well. So, and I think, and I kind of set up book 2 in kind of the same way in those short mini chapters so that you don't have to read more than 4 or 5 or 6 pages in a night if that's what you want to do. So, and you can come back or go all over. So if you want to, I put out a post about chapter 32 today with an excerpt on the Perazim. So if you haven't, so that's kind of how the book is set up, both 1 and 2. It's on a specific topic. So if you want to know about the Perazim giants, there's a chapter on that. If you want to know, about the Gebbelim, it's not a specific chapter, but I've mixed it in there with the Amalekim because they were kind of related. So, and I think that way it becomes a book that people can sort of come back to when they're looking for information. And what's really interesting in book 2 is I provide a lot of ready, set arguments for people to answer the naysayers, particularly within Christianity.
That you do, Mr. Wayne. All right. Tonight, a lot of people don't touch this topic, my friends. I think it was 2 months ago, Mr. Wayne talked about Camiel on this program. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Nazi Germany. We're going to be talking about from the very beginning to the end, and Mr. Wayne is going to try to put it all together for us tonight. All right, Mr. Wayne, whenever you'd like to get started, sir.
Sure. So I think the Nazi understanding from a contemporary basis is an important analogy and an analysis that people should take a deep dive into if they've got the time. I know there's a lot of information out there, but if we acknowledge one of the adages out of the book of Ecclesiastics, that nothing is new under the sun and what was will be again, and we recognize that the beast empires were always trying to be a world empire, just as there would have been a world empire that was trying to come about in the end time and was broken up by the apocalypse of the flood, and it had the same type of and the same Enochian mysticism after the flood for all of the beast empires as the daughters of Babel, that they weren't prevented from coming about, but they were not able to present the Antichrist figure. And so when we're talking about what's happening over and over and over and over, it's the cycle of trying to get a world empire, world religion, and an Antichrist presented, just as Nimrod represented that 100 years after the flood. And then you go into the beast empires. And remember, there's one more beast empire coming, but that doesn't mean that the spurious forces aren't always trying to bring this about before the ordained time. So you'll have, with Nostradamus, for example, who was a Rosicrucian, who was talking about it from a polytheist perspective of the end time. He foresaw or understood the plan that they were doing, that he predicted, if you buy into the interpretation of his very obscure prophecies, that Napoleon was the first one of the modern three. And there's a lot of parallels there, and that's why I cover Napoleon in book 1. And it has the same sort of organizational structure and agenda, and a usurper of the throne, as what Antichrist will be. And so the second one was Hisler, which is associated with the ancient name of the river of Austria. And that would be Hitler as being the second Antichrist figure. And then Nostradamus has another one that's coming down the road, although there might be two that are major. The wannabe counterfeit that Antichrist takes credit for. So that's where you have to watch out for these polytheist sort of diversions, because they want us to accept the first Antichrist yet to come of the last two major ones, so that you accept the true Antichrist as the Messiah. That's part of the deception. So, and as you connect in with nothing is new under the sun, what was will be again, you see this empire that rises in Nazi Germany, who wants to set up a Third Reich, a counterfeit millennium. And you have a Führer, Antichrist figure. Führer comes out of real ideology as a Messiah-like person. And he's going to set up within the whole hierarchy, the same hierarchy. So as a beast empire that he's trying to set up, because he wants to conquer the whole world. And you have an Antichrist figure, he's going to need a beast religion. And he's going to set up a polytheist religion that we'll talk a little bit about today as well. And so you see that whole hierarchy that was there in the beast empires, with a daughter of Babel religion and trying to be a world empire, trying to bring about the Antichrist. And the same thing would have happened before the flood. And Atlantis is thought to be that empire with the 10 kings that was setting up a Nephilim world order, and had the Enochian mysticism that was dominating it, and was going to sort of bring, at the behest of their gods, this end time, except God interceded and prevented that from happening. And one might make an argument with some of the things that helped with the Allies in World War II, as difficult it was, without that sort of little edge at exactly the right time, like the weather in Normandy and a whole list of other ones that God may have interceded to prevent the Antichrist from coming at that time. And he would have been an Antichrist wannabe. So the Nazi Germany has parallels with the end time. So it's a great analogy. So it had rapid technology of that time, just like we're receiving that now, all with an endeavor to make it like the days of Noah, the angelic technology. So what am I talking about with that technology? If you're not familiar with Nazi history, out of nowhere, out of a bankrupt nation that doesn't have an army, starting in 1933 in the creation of the Reichschurch, you have rapid technology with tanks, Tiger and Panzer tanks, that are the same model that are used to this very day. They were that far ahead on the technology, and they were tough to destroy, and they were designed to be low on the horizon, tough to see, and to deflect the shots. And if they had the ability to produce those technologies in great numbers, they would have probably won the war. And the same thing that happens with some of the other technologies is the timing comes too late and they can't produce enough. And so it's like in the Allies cases, you have the Sherman tank that is going to win just by sheer numbers over the better technology. And the Russians did the same thing with their tanks. And all of this is the same thing. So with the jets that come out, again, I mean, that advantage alone and air superiority would be enough to have tipped the balance if it had come in soon enough with enough quantity. They had the rocket engine to do missiles, and they were working on atomic technology. There was a race to see who could get the atomic bomb first, and with the missiles, with atomic bombs, what could they have done with that? And they introduced the blitzkrieg strategy that came out of nowhere, that surprised every country and army in the world, and a nation who had no army before and had lost World War I. I think World War I, World War II are essentially the same war. It's just an extension of it and the settlement of it. And they had created this sort of bell-shaped device that is thought to be an interdimensional machine that Nimrod, as we've talked about in past, was trying to develop that technology. And as Antichrist will have some sort of access to that technology, because he, in Daniel 8:10, actually goes into heaven, probably in the time of the war in heaven, and brings down some of the starry hosts to trample on them. And you have the abyss being opened. And you also have the submarine technology that they developed and created that scourged the oceans and sunk so many ships of the Allies. And they almost won the war based on the submarines. And this knowledge, they say, was supplied to them, that it came from their celestial masters, the Great White Brotherhood, spirit guides, aliens, whatever you want to call them. And as we'll talk, it fits right with part of the whole sort of hierarchy. So quickly, some other things. I don't know how many things we'll cover off in detail today. So there was that. They had the new man, Nephilim, ideology, that they wanted to create the new Aryan race because they believed they descended from Thule or Tula, as it's also pronounced, which is sort of a Norse Asgard and or Atlantis. So same sort of ideology, and the Aryans were blonde-haired, pale-skinned, blue-eyed, Tuatha giants that I've talked about a lot. They had acquired a throne of Satan, as Revelation talks about. They had that polytheist religion that they set up in the Reichschurch in 1933. They usurped the government. They created a genocide of the Jewish people and were starting to genocide Christians and others. They were a culture and religion and political system that was rooted in real ideology, which is Rosicrucian doctrine, because secret societies were part of the hierarchy to bring them about. And real ideology is about something in the blood that if you could backwards engineer, you could create the new giants, the new man. And they believed that they had direct genes that went back to those Aryans before the flood. And they try and take over the world. And we talked about the Bell time machine and the high technology of angelic technology. And there's a grail aspect to the culture as well. So we'll talk about that in the religion when that comes about. And they were searching and had access to ancient knowledge, and they were absolutely smitten with occult knowledge and finding it. So that's just kind of, a quick sort of rundown as to how much there is for topics in terms of talking about the Nazi movement. So we should probably talk a little bit about the Reich Church and then sort of work maybe a timetable, because this, as I say, this is a very, very, very large topic. So in 1933, they launched the Reich Church, and it was a religion called Ariosophy. And it was a real and Volkish ideology overlaid onto theosophy of the goddess Sophia, of the mother goddess. And we've talked about the mother goddess on past shows. And so it sort of goes rogue from theosophy and actually will turn on members of the more Western progressive wing of the theosophists. And progressives were the Western version of National Socialism. And they had to go underground after World War II, and they didn't poke their heads up again until, the late 60s and early 70s. And that's why you have such a similarity in policies. And they are as they move along on their woke agenda, they are the pre-genocidal National Socialists, and they want to create National Socialism on a globalist scale. And they're all globalists. So that's why, and when I talk about the policies, they are the same, including the corporations and the oligarchs working for the state. And the individual portions, if you go down, and I don't have time today to go through it, but you have a whole list of policies that they've implemented that are identical. So they'll continue on that. And we're starting to see the persecution of Jewish people and Christians just as they were doing. So it's the same organization that is going to be part of the end time, that is going to not only create another Holocaust against the Judean people, but a genocide against the saints worldwide. So it's coming. So this church is created in 1933, and the Fuhrer is the Messianic figure of this church. And a lot of the principles of it is, as what I'm saying, it's a marrying of secret societies, theosophy, and Vril ideology and Grail ideology. So you have several people that are important contributors to this ideology and political religious cult. And so you have von List, who's an architect of Ariosophy, and Jorg Lanz von Liebenfels is another one, who are coming out of the secret societies, and they combine theosophy with Volkisch ideology, with the New Temple Order of Liefenbels, which is a Templar type order, and the Armaden Orden, which becomes the Germanen Orden order, and also members of the Tula Society that are going to bring all of this in. And I'll talk about some of those societies. I just want to stay focused on the religious aspect. And so Liebenfels creates this New Temple Order in 1907. And theosophy is introduced by Helen Blavatsky in 1880. So you start to see that kind of evolution. And so in the early 1900s, you have a person called Stefan George, and he is a prolific poet and writer of occult and theosophy. And he's part of the building blocks of this Ariosophy and the Nazi religion and political system. And he co-opted Longris out of Wagner and the term for the Fuhrer as the Messiah for this movement, and they would be on a look for a Messiah from that point on. That turned out to be Hitler. And his writings were later taught to the Hitler's youth movement starting in about 1923 to 25 and continued throughout the 30s. So they were getting brainwashed with his ideology. Wagner is basically Volkisch ideology laid over into his music and his plays. And it drew heavily on Eschenbach's Grail writing. He was a great writer in the Middle Ages of the Grail tales sponsored by the Knights Templar. And he was anti-Semitic, and so were the writings anti-Semitic. Sort of vaguely, obscurely done, but it's overlaid in there. And this heavily influenced Hitler. In fact, Hitler went to see a play by Wagner, and I think it was Lohengrin, where you have the Fuhrer in there, in 1933, before going and announcing the next morning the Reichschurch being formed. And so you start to see that there is a significant intellectual dynamite that's being put together to create larger bombs. And so Elfin Rosenberg is another one of these pioneers that are going to be putting together this Reichschurch. And he's the maker of Nazi doctrine and the Nazi theoretician. So he's a theology individual as well. Political wonk, theology wonk of the new system. And he was a member of the Tula Society, or the Thule Society that we talked about. And he wrote a book called The Myth of the 20th Century as one of his books, amongst others, and proclaimed the death of Christianity. So even though they're going to adopt Jesus into this Rice church, but as a mortal prophet, as a teacher, typical Gnosticism, and as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned Aryan versus who he was. So they reimagined him. Again, just what we see going on today with the reimagining of Jesus. And then another important individual is Ernst Bergman, who wrote Die National Kisch. And I'm sure I butchered that a little bit. But it's basically the German National Church. And he was a member of the German Belief Movement. And he said, that Ariosophy was essentially a German version of the cult of Mithras, which was the god said to be born on December 25, a religion in Rome that becomes part of the Roman Church mixing in of the doctrine and ideology. And it is a branch of an older religion called Zoroastrianism, which was the religion of not only the Hindus as a base religion, the Persians, but the religion of the Indo-Aryans after the flood that they reinstated from the religion before the flood. It is Enochian mysticism. And so he took the Ariosophy back to that sort of roots. And that he believed that Jesus was a pantheist and that the Bible was corrupted to make him a monotheist. So he was a polytheist. So that's why they reinvent him and reimagine him that way, just as they do with polytheism today in the New Age movement. And that his church was based in a racist doctrine of a racist supremacy. So it starts with ideological supremacy, and then it's manifested in the physical way, in any way that they want to suit their agenda, just as we see the ideological supremacy being used today and then used in every which way to divide people and create hate and to provide context and reason why you can persecute people, cancel them, arrest them, put them in jails without representation, not provide health because they are subhuman, because they have a lower level of suprematist ideology. In other words, it's not really a good way of putting it, but they don't have that supremacist ideology, so they're mundane and they're not worthy. They're to be wiped from the face of the earth. And that's part of this whole genocidal mix that is being put in by the Nazis that we're starting to see now, that's going to come and make the Holocaust done by the Nazis small by comparison. So that's the religious part of the hierarchy. So the Messiah, Führer, religious hierarchy. Now let's just go back and look at some of the organizations that are going to be piecing together the rise of Nazi Germany. So we'd already talked about Theosophy taking root in the 1880s. And then there's going to be a formation of groups. Some of them I've quickly mentioned, but there's a number of groups, and these are essentially secret societies. These are high-level secret societies. These are the bloodline part. So it starts at the Rosicrucian level. Okay, that's why that real ideology of the Rosicrucianism that I talked about is so relevant, so that you know the power that's going in, just as you had banking money from the bloodlines that put the Nazis into business. But that's not where I'm at today in terms of what talking about their rise. So in 1800 to 1900, Theosophy begins to spawn anti-Semitic views through the influence of the Pan-Aryan societies, occultists, and Volkisch ideology, and Grail ideologies. So we see Theosophy introduced, and then we see it starting to take on an Ariosophy, formalized in 1933, but starting to move in that sort of direction. And in the early 1900s, You have the Armaden Order, created by von List, who's a wealthy German nationalist of Indo-Aryan Teutonic ideology, and he believes genealogy, and that he's been reincarnated from those past lives of those generations, and he is a full believer in the occultist or the polytheist religion, but with that Ariosophy, Aryan flavor to it. And it has a political agenda that is adopting the Illuminati agenda to destroy Christianity and Judaism. So as you move forward to 1907, you have an organization that I've mentioned previously called the New Templar Order, created by Jorgen Lanz von Liefenfels that I talked about, and he was also in partnership with the Cistercian monks. And the Cistercian monks were the primary movers in terms of the camouflage religious aspect, along with the royal bloodlines that created the Knights Templars. And the Teutonic Order that's going to come out is a sister organization of the Templars, and the SS is based on the Teutonic Knights. So again, you see all of these historical and polytheist overlays going into the formation of Nazi Germany. And in 1912, von List combines the Armaden Order with the New Temple Order to form the Germanen Order, the Order of Germany. And it is distinctly promoting Ariosophy and Wagner's works as part of that Grill and Völkisch ideology that is just very, very popular in Germany at that time. And in 1918, the Thule Society, or the Thule, Thule Society, is formed by Bettendorf. And Bettendorf is another one of these Nazi builders. And in 1912, he combines with von List to establish the Germanen Order, right? And in 1918, he establishes the Thule Society. And in 1919, Hitler joins the DAP.
Okay.
And he's adopted into the National Socialist Workers' Party movement. And then a fellow by the name of Dietrich Eckhart recognizes this individual because of his oratory capabilities that were basically sort of hypnotic. And he's going to become the mentor to Hitler. And Dietrich is a Thule Society member. And he has a newspaper promoting this type of ideology at that time in 1918 and forward that's called the Völkisch Befpacher, Bephacher, that Hitler is going to become the editor of after a little bit of mentoring. And so they're going to have their propaganda start to the Nazi regime at this point in time. And in 1920s, early 1920s, the Thule Society buys the Völkisch Befpacher newspaper and continues to employ Eckhart as part of that ownership and editorship, and using Hitler to promote it as well. And in the mid-1920s, you have the Hitler Youth Movement that's being started. That is going to be the formation for the young members, initiated members, to become the SS, and they're going to get that Stefan George brainwashing that we had talked about earlier in the show. And Rudolf Hess is also part of this Thule Society that takes its origination back to Atlantis or Asgard, and before the flood, that is giants. And there's another interesting individual in terms of this giant connection named Hans Horberger that puts his slant on the Nazi movement. And he was one of the greatest authors of the Nazi movement and promoted as this great scientist, and
Wow.
wrote Glacial Cosmology. And he believed in the giants of Sumeria in the Bible, and that Hitler was heavily influenced by the teaching of Hans Horberger. And Hans Horberger believed that superhumans ruled before the flood and after the flood, and that the Aryans, the German Aryan belief, had their genealogies connected back to them in their upper levels of the society or the nobility. So as we start to look forward on how this comes together, I'll let you in here in a few minutes because I know it's a large topic, but I just wanted to get sort of the baseline down here in terms of how this thing comes together. So in 1923 to 25, you have the formation of the Hitler Youth Movement. In 1930, the Nazis become the second party in an election. They bring something in that in 1910 as part of the building blocks, which was the altar of Zeus that was discovered in the 1860s. And in 1930, they're going to build a museum that's completed for it. So now you have the throne of Satan, because this is the throne of Satan as it's believed from the Greek perspective, that has now been brought to Berlin for Satan's regime, because an Antichrist figure has to rule with Satan. So they're going to worship the Antichrist and Satan. So it has to be part of that. And so that comes, we get the throne of Satan in the early parts of Revelation 2 and 3. So in 1933, Hitler comes to power. And then after viewing Wagner's play, he forms the Reichschurch. And you have the Nuremberg rallies that are starting in 1933, and this populist sort of movement that is going to overtake the Nazi Germany. And then in 1933, Spears builds the Zeus altar, as we talked about, in another permanent museum. And then 1935, Hitler announces the Nuremberg laws and the final solution. So that's kind of a quick sort of overview in terms of how they're made up of secret societies, bloodlines, Gnostic type of religions, and is a prototype for the end time. They would have brought it about if they had been able to finish their war successfully.
Well, how close was he to the atomic bomb in your view, Gary?
Well, they were way ahead of the U.S. or anybody else, but they had an issue, and there's movies and stories about it, but they were trying to get their heavy water out of Norway and were getting close to having that heavy water because they thought they had the formulas and the math and everything that goes along with it. And of course, those plants were taken out and they were set back significantly because heavy water was a new technology that they were going to be required. So if that hadn't been done, they would have beat the Americans to creating the atomic bomb. And they had the rockets before the Americans had successfully tested the atomic bomb, and no significant delivery system, right? They had to launch.
I think it was Warren von Braun.
What's that?
Warren von Braun built the first V2 rocket.
Yes. And Operation Paperclip took him and that technology and the scientists all back to the U.S. to continue with that kind of research.
On Warren von Braun's tombstone, it states that out of Psalms 19:1, I do believe, and it states that the firmament is Yahweh's handiwork. You got to really, look why he put that on his tombstone. What do you think, Gary?
Who put that on his tombstone?
He wasn't even a Christian. I think he was a Christian when he passed.
Who put that on his tombstone?
Warren von Braun did.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, he was a scientist. We don't know whether or not he was somebody of the Ariosophy belief system. You would certainly would have been influenced by it. So I don't know.
Yeah. But
But he was,
it's just interesting. And another
yeah.
interesting fact is that the entire world allowed Nazi Germany to change the hertz to 432 hertz. Why? Just my view is this is how they got in touch with the fallen angels. What's your view, Gary?
I'm not sure I understood that.
Well, they see in 1945, Nazi Germany changed the hertz, frequency and vibration.
Yep. Yep.
And the whole world allowed Nazi Germany to change the hertz to 432 hertz. I wonder why.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about vibration, you're talking about angelic technology. So you're
Yes.
looking for something that's going to be able to intersect and be a platform to receive that technology in part. So it would be a sort of, I think, a building block or a bridge to what would have been coming down with the Nazis, because let's face it, they were receiving angelic technology from the invisible ones, right? And
Yes.
so I expect that just the MO would suggest that.
And do you think they continued their technology? And do you think Bird actually lost? Because Bird states on in Argentina that another third world would come out of uh, through Antarctica. Uh, I'm not. Admiral Byrd basically got his butt kicked, and he goes into Argentina and said that the third adversary would be an unknown adversary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. And yeah, in Antarctica and the North Pole, with his research and visitations, he was suggesting there was civilizations that would come through there and through portals, and who knows what's going to happen. But that will be part of, I think, what I think it would have happened in World War II given enough success and time. I mean, the Nazis were trying to build down in Antarctica. So I think they were aware of it because they would have been told about it. I think they wanted to be in Norway and up in the north as well. Again, probably for access to that. So we know in the end time that we're going to have angels walking amongst us again, as in the days of Noah. We're going to have spiritual offspring. They're probably going to be disguised in this alien phenomena mythos to deceive people. And just different sort of levels of technology for the different types of aliens that are fighting against what they would call the evil lord of the universe to win a realm on their own. Typically, the Earth, as talked about in those Doctor Strange movies, the same sort of ideology, and want to have a treaty to live on their own. So that's what they're trying to bring about with the end time. So these things are going to be coming into play because nothing is new under the sun. What happened at Babel, what happened before the flood, what has been tried to be put together throughout our history is going to be permitted to come about as it was before the flood. And so we're going to see these ones walking amongst us. And we're not free of the Nazi influence. I mean, it's still alive today, and things that they put together survive to haunt us into this day. I mean, there was people were familiar with bin Laden, and he came out of the Al Wahhabi sect out of Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And these were Nazi collaborators and part of the Nazi intelligence in World War II. So they're kind of put together in this terrorist type of mode. And then after World War II, they start to work with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they've become funded by Alan Dulles of the CIA.
Wow.
Yeah, and so this is the group that's going to then be tapped by George Bush Sr., who was head of the CIA in 1979 to help with fighting the Russians in Afghanistan. So they fund them and train them some more, who bin Laden is amongst. And so they've trained up their own adversaries because they want to create chaos in the world so they can cattle herd everybody into National Socialism on a globalist scale. And George Sr.'s father was involved with the banking of the Nazis.
Wow.
So, and as you know, as I alluded to earlier, you have the Rothschilds banks, and Prescott Bush, he served on UBC's board at the time of putting the banking together. So the BIS Bank was funded by the Rockefellers. And the main banks that are involved are the Schroeder Bank, acting as financial agents to the U.S. and Britain via John Dulles, Allen's brother. And the Schroeder and the Reichstag banks controlled by BIS, which was funded by the Rockefellers. And so John Foster, Allen Dulles, and a lawyer for the Warburgs and the Farben Bank, and the Rockefellers and Schroeder and UBC and BIS become this banking vault funding the Nazi movement because they want them to take on Russia, because they're the ones who funded Trotsky and Lenin to knock off the Russian bloodline and take over the country. But it gets out of control with Stalin taking over. So they're going to create a little bit further right of extreme left of communism to produce National Socialism. And it's still far left. It's just not far left as anarchism or communism. And so both Dulles and Allen were CFR, and part of the whole secret society and political influence of the CFR. And so you have Prescott Bush as a driving force at the time of World War II to create the CIA. It's called by a different name before that. And you just see this interaction and the transgenerational nature of the families and the influences. And then we end up having two Bushes that are intimately connected to the Wahhabi group that creates Al-Qaeda. And you've got like 3 generations that are heavily involved that are working this continuous plan. So when we talk about a conspiracy that is transgenerational, and it goes right back to the beginning of time. We have a modern version that sort of starts about 2,000 years ago, but it is a significant part of how the world works as they're trying to bring about the end time and a globalist state and a universal religion. And Prescott Bush gets his introduction into these circles by Ed Harriman, a very famous industrialist of the U.S. and funded by the Rothschilds.
Again,
just as they funded the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Harrimans, all the main families, the DuPonts, all of them were funded as stable agents for the Rothschilds, who are the banking for the secret societies and the royal bloodlines, and were created to replace the Templars outside the church. And then later they got control of the Jesuits, through the Jesuits, the Roman Catholic banking, and all is now located in Switzerland, which was the beginning of banking. And they have the White Cross of the Hospitallers, the Knights of St. John, because they took on the Templar wealth and actually started the banking just after 1307 in Switzerland. And they swear that logo to this day, and they've managed to centralize the other banking in there as well. So have it completely controlled, hidden, and well protected within mountains. That's where the true money is. That's where most all the money of, let's say, the most significant amount of off the books wealth is located. So when I talk about off the books wealth, we're talking about money that isn't owned by Gates or Musk, as being, some of the richer people in the world. Those people, their money is nothing compared to what's off the books and hidden. And when I did my research early on in the 2000s, as I was putting the book together in terms of the off the books wealth, at that time it was estimated at somewhere between 3 and 500 trillion.
Whoa.
And that's over 20 years ago. One wonders what that wealth is today.
Yes, quadruple that probably. Gary, in your research, these Morgans and Chases and all this elite, DuPont, and all this trail leads to them, right? I mean, why ain't they talked about in the news and newspapers and
Because
why?
they control the media.
Because they control the media.
Yeah, they like to be, and of course the DuPont families are a little bit lower down, and
Yes.
they're the pseudo blue bloods. But how it works is they want to be the invisible ones on the earth, so that they can work behind the scenes, pull the strings, and nobody can see what they're doing. They'll show us what they want us to see. They'll show us, like, where the Bohemian Grove Society meets and picks their presidents. We'll see the lower levels working with some of the higher levels at the Bilderbergers, but they don't show you the true workings and when the true meetings. The Davos crew reports to the Committee of 300. So they're preparing the world through what they let us see, but we can't see everything that they're doing because they work behind the scenes. And so the media are nothing but, attack dogs and lap dogs and propagandist arms. They are, the propaganda that the Nazis used.
Yes.
They are the, like the newspaper, the Volkes Befokker newspaper of, and I'm trying to remember the name of the propagandist in Hitler, but that's what in the regime. But that's what they do. They're like the Pravda of the Russian regime. And we see that. We see the censorship. We see the deceptions. We see the lies. They only report what they want to report to manipulate the people. And then they lie about other things, and they support the lies being said and done as being truthful. We've seen that in spades since the Obama presidency. And then it went to a whole new level with Trump being elected, and then it's gone to a completely other level through COVID. That trend's going to continue. That's part of the birth pangs as we get closer in the fig tree generation.
Yes, the fig tree generation. Yes, sir. Yes, Gary. You were coming up on the hour, and where do people need to go to get your book? I know you said because people are just now tuned in and in and out, but
Sure.
all right, my friends. My name is Bishop Holsonback. This is my YouTube channel and my Facebook group, and I want to welcome you to the program. All right, my friends. Check this out. If the righteous Enoch wrote books, so did the bad Enoch. And we call this Enochian magic. But my friends, somebody had to teach Cain Enochian magic, Enochian mysticism. My view, it was the fallen angels, Azazel or Zamizal, or it could even been Lilith that taught Cain. See, because Cain taught the bad Enoch, right? The bad Enoch taught Tubal Cain, Nimrod. How did Nimrod become a mighty warrior? I'm sorry, my friends. How did Nimrod become a Nephilim? He was once a mighty warrior for Yahweh. He jumped ship and became a Nephilim. How? Enochian mysticism. This is how, my friends. In 1942, the entire world allowed Nazi Germany to change the hertz to 432 hertz. Why would the entire world allow Nazi Germany to change the hertz? Because, my friends, this is how they got in touch with the fallen angels. Vril societies. There was lots of different societies that studied hertz and frequency and vibration. You heard Gary touch about it tonight. My view is, excuse me, my friends, my view is Nazi Germany gave up their motherland to seek new lands beyond the ice ring. See that ice ring that's going around the flat earth? Well, there's more lands beyond that ice ring. You can take that to the bank, my friends. The Fourth Reich leaks technology to the whole world. All right. And if you're having trouble with the flat earth theory, look at the UN flag. It's a flat earth map. Do your research, my friends, before you start making fun of others. I've been a flat earther since the very beginning. And my friends, you've been lied to. And lie number one was to hide your creator's name. In 1611, King James removed the name of Yahweh and added God and Lord. This is a title, not a name. Our creator's name is Yahweh. This is not a Jew thing. There's much power in the name of Yahweh. Yeshua. My friends, when you're pronouncing a Hebrew word, it's from the right to the left. Yeshua. And the Son of Man, he is near. Lie number two was to confuse you about the cosmology, the plane that you live on. They couldn't have you knowing the true cosmology of the earth. No way. Lie number three was to confuse you about Enoch. You got the two Enochs. You got the Enochian calendar, the city of Enoch that Cain built in Nod. They try to confuse you about Enoch. The righteous Enoch, he didn't have to die. He was taken to heaven at the age of 365. All right, friends. The angels admired Enoch so much that they took him on different journeys and showed him visions. The book of Enoch is a flat earth book. You can't get around it. All right, we just had a comment from Kevin Kennedy, TMI. He went to 10 dimensions. I agree. I just want to thank Kevin, Brother Kevin, for commenting in the comment box tonight. It takes a lot for me to come on there. And I know it takes a lot for y'all to comment. I just want to thank all night long. We had great comments from Brother Collins as well and others. And I want to thank all who's commented in this comment box tonight. All right, my friends, check this out. We have about 14 people tuned in. That's on YouTube. They don't show you the count that's on Facebook. I have a timeline and a Facebook group that we're broadcasting into as well. So I want to thank all my Facebook. They're in my Facebook group. There's over 25,000 members in our group. And I want to thank all that's tuned in. Just had a comment from Brother Kevin. In your opinion, Bishop, who created the Greys body suits? The Misfit 12. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but I'm not really too sure about your question either. So maybe you can re-ask it again, Kevin. Because I don't want to butcher your question, but the Greys, you're talking about the Greys, the aliens, right? They're just little Nephilim, is what they are. Gary has a whole, I believe I have the video, and Gary breaks down all the Nephilim, the little ones. There's little fairies, there's goblins, there's all kinds of different demonic beings. Okay, B, aliens, the ones who abduct people. All right. Yes, sir. My view is they're Nephilim. And yes, and it does go on, but they're not aliens. They're Nephilim. There's different Nephilims out there, and the Greys are just part of them. That's Gary and I's view. All right, my friends, let's talk a little bit more about Enochian mysticism. Let's talk a little bit more about Nazi Germany. My friends, I'm giving you fact information. Nimrod's birthday is December 25th. All right. Information. He became a Nephilim. Your Bible says Gibborim, Raphaim, Nephilim. It's all the same. How did he become a Nephilim? It's common sense through Enochian mysticism. All right. Little is known about Enochian mysticism. But my friends, I'm here to testify. It's real. All right. I put a lot of information out there. I'm just going to make shorter videos. So I'm going to cut this short. But before I do, please, my friends, I ask you to please pray with me. Yahweh, Father Yahweh, you are the beginning and you are the end. Father, we offer ourselves to you to build with us and to do with us as thy will. Relieve us of the bondage of self, that we better do thy will and not our own will. And take away our difficulties, that our victories may bear witness over the people we will help, Father. Father, you are the beginning and you are the end. Please, Father, I'm asking you to touch these people out here that just heard your name for the first time. These are the people that need to see your magnificent power, Father. Yahweh is new to a lot of people, a lot of Gentiles. You said the Gentiles would take your name back. And we have, Father. But Father, these are the ones that need to see your magnificent power. They need to see your blessings. I ask you to bless them all. All right, my friends. My name is Bishop Holsonback. This is my YouTube channel and my Facebook group. And I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. Amen, brothers and sisters. Amen.